The story starts with our protagonist suddenly waking up and wondering where she was. However, she quickly recalled that she was in her own room. She was Indra Spring Court. However, she then began to wonder why she had remembered some memories of another person and started to believe that it might have been memories from her past life. At that moment, she was the daughter of a noble family. However, in that world, the people who lived in that house hated her. Even the nobleman who seemed to be her father, and the woman who had given birth to her, and also the half-sister born to her father's mistress. Not even a maid went to help her, considering she was a 5-year-old girl who was sick in bed. Obviously, at that point, she snapped and began yelling while stepping out of bed and kicking some things in her room. She wanted to know why that was happening. After all, she believed that, even if her parents were nobles, they should at least properly take care of their own daughter after she collapsed from stress. Right after, she decided that she was going to make use of the knowledge she had just seen in that dream. In that instant, she began to feel dizzy and realized that, as expected, her weakened body wouldn't move easily just yet. Afterward, she began to wonder what that world had that her old one didn't and quickly realized that it was magic. Unfortunately, she did not know of it since it wasn't included in her deceased mother's Spartan education. In fact, her mother cursed at her every day and vented her frustration by drilling etiquette into our protagonist. In the end, she just kept waiting for her husband who all but lived with his mistress and eventually died. Furthermore, it seemed that the mistress died around the same time, and the man returned to the estate with their child. However, her father despised our protagonist, who was the daughter of his lawful wife, and doted only on the daughter from his affair, which was why she was convinced that she should stay positive and do whatever she wanted. She then concluded that, from what she had gathered, magic in that world relied on intuition. In fact, at that moment she felt something soft and faint floating in the air, and began to wonder if that was what it felt like when you could use magic. That made her feel optimistic, and she thought that she was sure she would be able to use magic someday. After all, believing in yourself mattered. However, for the time being, she decided to look for the next book. Sometime later, she opened the door of her room and said that not a single person had gone there while she had been bedridden for a whole week. Still, she had at least gotten a feel for magic, or so she thought, which was a good start in her eyes. At that moment, her father appeared in front of her while looking very pissed and asked her how long she planned to pretend to be sick before calling her pathetic. Nevertheless, before she could reply, he told her that if she was awake, she should immediately go to the dining table, otherwise she would go without food. Nonetheless, our protagonist decided to change the script and retorted by saying that his sheer cruelty was very astounding. After all, he dared to call someone unconscious for an entire week, a faker. In fact, she went as far as to say that she was almost impressed, which obviously shocked her father, who quickly asked her what that was. Count Springcourt then asked her if she had heard him tell her to sit at the table, to which she replied while running away that she had heard him clearly all the way to the part about skipping meals, before adding that he was excellent at beating down the sick and the dead. At that point, the man was starting to get pissed and asked her what she had said, to which she replied that, at the very least, for meals she would eat alone, before adding that she would have her meals in her room because she would like to enjoy her food. Those words pissed the Count even more, and he told her that she really had a wretched personality, before asking rhetorically why someone like our protagonist had even been born. However, Indra decided to reply and told him that she supposed she had just ended up resembling the rest of the man's bloodline, which caught the Count by surprise and annoyed him. Nevertheless, before he could say anything else, she greeted him with courtesy and bid him farewell while thinking, with a mental smug expression, that she had gotten a win. In fact, she couldn't help but admit that she felt a little pleased. At that moment, a younger girl called her, and our protagonist quickly greeted Primrose, her little sister. Almost immediately, the very energetic little girl asked our protagonist if she was all better, before asking her to eat meals together starting that day. The girl then said that if that didn't happen, everyone would scold her, before adding that when our protagonist was not there, everyone ended up scolding the little girl, even though it was not Indra's fault for not eating with them. So, the little girl wanted her big sister to eat together with her. However, our protagonist refused, which made Primrose run away while screaming that she was going to tell their father that Indra was being selfish. As for Indra, she couldn't care less about it. Primrose was the spoiled daughter of the mistress, and our protagonist, her old self, used to take all the scolding in her place for every mistake she made by saying that everything was our protagonist's fault, which had worn down Indra's spirit little by little. That was why our protagonist thought that flat-out refusing Primrose felt refreshing, although she was aware that she would probably be without meals for a while once the adults learned what she had just done. However, she was not scared and simply decided that she would just have to take action. Shortly after, she arrived in the kitchen and greeted the cooks in a loud voice. Shen then told one of the cooks that she had a few questions or requests, while thinking that, firstly, she needed to win over the cooks, and for that she would use the card she held, the knowledge from her past. The seasoning in that world was basically just salt, and there were barely any spices available. There was alcohol, but not fermented seasonings. So, she was willing to use that to her advantage. A few days later, the first simple fermented seasoning was complete. They had to just mash up some fruits or vegetables in a sterilized container and let them sit for a few days. At first, the cooks were completely freaked out, but then they were hooked. They just had to marinate the meat with the new seasoning and cook it slowly. They loved the new flavor so much that they even took Indra's portion to eat it, which made our protagonist sad, and the cooks apologized to her. Indra then wondered out loud why they had alcohol yet. No one was using similar fermentation techniques for food, to which one of the cooks replied that most people wouldn't normally think of intentionally rotting food as a cooking method. Right after, he asked her if she could make alcohol, and she replied that she should be able to make fruit wine, before adding that if brewing didn't require a license there, perhaps she would give it a try. Almost immediately, all the cooks bowed while humbly asking for her guidance. Afterward, they began to prepare the wine, while the cooks prepared delicious meals for our protagonist. Sadly, one day, one of the maids informed our protagonist that she was not allowed in the kitchen anymore. The maid also told her that Indra's meals would be taken to her room from that moment onward. Moreover, any necessities would be handled by her personal attendant from that moment onward. After hearing that, our protagonist wondered if the cooks were actually troubled by her being there, or if one of the servants had ratted her out, or if it had been something else entirely. Right after, the maid gave her that day's meal and left the room. Once Indra was left alone, she threw herself on the bed while thinking that, in the end, in that entire mansion, she didn't have a single ally. So, she concluded that if that was the case, then being a noble lady meant nothing. Right after, she cut her hair, and once she finished, she complained since she felt all grimy and greasy, mostly because that world mostly used sponge baths, which was why she was going to make soap once she mastered magic. She kept living in the mansion while practicing magic, and 1 year later, she was finally able to cast a spell and said that her magic training was finally paying off. Before adding that if she sent an image to the floaty stuff in the air, it took form. However, the result differed from her memories of the other world. Still, she decided to ignore it and get back to training in the woods behind the estate that day. She even grabbed her hard-earned wooden sword while thinking that she was finally getting the hang of physical combat too. Nevertheless, she was aware that she still didn't know what the standards in that world were. That was why she thought that someday, when she left that place and met someone who could use magic, she would ask them to teach her how to properly use it. Then, while practicing some sword moves, she said that she wished someone obviously evil or a beast she was allowed to fight would just show up or something. In the meantime, somewhere else, a young man was surprised after learning that a powerful monster might have appeared. In fact, the clerk in charge of the place told him that he wanted to hire him for the job. However, the man was skeptical and replied that he had never heard of any powerful monsters around there, and the clerk insisted by saying that he was specifically requesting the young man before asking him to trust him on that. The clerk then told the young man that he was always wandering around anyway, and he was not taking any other requests at that moment. The young man then asked the clerk if that was really a job someone like him should be handling. After hearing that, the clerk replied that, for some reason, loud noises had been coming from the forest, and sometimes they even said the ground rumbled. The clerk even told the young man that perhaps a dragon had shown up or something. Yeah, a dragon in the shape of a young girl. That was the reason the clerk had specifically called the young man, whose nickname was Thunderclap Whitefang. Sometime later, the young man was wandering in the forest while thinking that it was too quiet and that there was not a single small monster in sight, which meant that a powerful monster was lurking. He then readied his sword and went deeper in, but then he was surprised by what he saw. In front of him was a little girl trying to hide behind a tree. Once he saw her, he quickly noticed that even though the kid had pale skin like a noble, they were dressed in shabby clothes. Moreover, the kid had a delicate build like a girl with a beautiful face. So, the young man wanted to know who the hell they were. He then asked her if she was a human while thinking that, even though they looked like an adorable little human, there was a crazy amount of mana particles around the kid, so he couldn't say for sure if the kid was a human or a monster. Right after, the man asked her what she was doing in a place like that, to which she replied that he had just said her line. After all, that was her land. She then asked him if he was with someone there, to which he replied that he was not with anyone, while thinking that the kid understood his words. However, he quickly noticed that the mana in the area had gotten denser, and he wondered if the kid had raised their guard before recalling that the dangerous vibes the kid was emitting were like the kid from the song. At that moment, the man was sure that the kid was human and was utterly broken inside. On the other hand, our protagonist wondered if that was one of those flag triggers she had heard of. She also wondered what the deal was with that guy. After all, it was unusual for someone outside the manor to suddenly show up. Besides, she noticed that he was younger than her father, and that even though his hair was white, it was unwashed and looked more like a murky cream color. In short, at a glance, he looked like a carefree traveler, but he had a sword. At that moment, she thought that if the man was connected to the estate, then her training out there getting exposed would be a pain. In fact, she began to consider the possibility of killing him. The man then noticed her strange behavior and wondered why the kid was looking at him with that weird expression. Right after, he asked her to calm down and introduced himself as Sword, an adventurer. Immediately thereafter, he told her that he had gone there on a survey job, so he had to ask her again if she was a human, just to be sure. Those words confused our protagonist, who couldn't understand that the man was treating her like she was not human. She then asked him what part of her exactly looked non-human to him. As for the man, after seeing that the kid was angry, he asked her again to calm down, to which she replied by asking how she was supposed to do it. He then explained to her that he had gone there to investigate the strange happenings in the forest in recent times. Apparently, people said that there had been massive sounds and even tremors, so he wanted to know if our protagonist knew anything about it. After hearing that, she thought that she might have an idea, or perhaps not, and then began to recall her days of intense training. Still, she wasn't sure she had been the one who had caused that much noise. After all, no one at the mansion had made a fuss or anything about it. However, she then realized that she barely ever saw any of them. At that moment, the man told her that if anything weird happened, she should let him know, before adding that he would be back to check things out again, which surprised her. And that surprise increased by tons when he patted her head and bid her farewell. She couldn't believe that he had closed the distance between them in an instant and without her noticing it, even if she was lost in thought at that moment. Moreover, no one had ever touched her like that before, and she had to admit that the feeling was really startling. The following day, the man returned and met again with our protagonist. He then noticed that the kid was not as on edge as the day before. However, he also thought that she was still kind of a danger to herself. After all, even though she was on guard, her reactions were slow, almost like someone who didn't get along with the adults around them and had just ended up left alone, just like the man used to be. Furthermore, when he bid her farewell, she signaled him to pat her head again, which he did while thinking that she needed to be more cautious. Afterward, their interactions increased, and he asked her if she had seen any monsters around there, to which she replied that she hadn't seen anything moving. He then asked her if she had been staying there the whole time, to which she replied that she went there every day, but only during the day. Right after, the man told her that if she had been in that forest regularly, she should have had an idea about those loud noises, and she replied that sometimes there were landslides and occasionally rocks broke apart. The man pressed further and asked her if she was sure that it was not monsters rampaging or anything similar, to which she replied by reflecting on the matter without saying anything. That confused the man a lot, and he thought that he had no idea of what was happening there. Moreover, he also admitted that the kid was on his mind too, and decided that he would drop by for a few days while he investigated. So, the days went by, and he kept going there. In fact, he realized that he had done it more than he expected. Nevertheless, he noticed that the kid was way too unfamiliar with people. At first, the kid was on guard, but then the kid had gotten attached to him, and he wondered if that was because he was the only one paying attention to them. At that point, he thought that if he were some thug, the kid would have been kidnapped and sold off by that time. On the other hand, Our protagonist thought that the man kept showing up before thinking that being on guard every time was such a hassle. Of course, she would never admit that she hadn't turned him away because she was happy he had patted her head. In the end, she didn't care who he was, but she knew that she might be able to get information from outside, so she was just using him. It was not like she thought that his hand that patted her head was big or comforting or anything. That had nothing to do with her behavior. Moreover, while she was eating the food the man had given to her, she thought that if things got dangerous, she could just kill him. At that moment, he couldn't take it anymore and told her that she should be more cautious, before asking her what had happened to all that wariness she had before. Right after, he added that she shouldn't accept stuff from a strange man so easily, nor should she eat it right on the spot. Not to mention that she had gotten food all over her mouth. After hearing that, she simply asked him if that was how it was supposed to be, to which he replied that the world was not full of guys like him. Sword then told her that there were people out there who made a living kidnapping and selling others, but she dismissed that and simply asked what other jobs were there. Still, he told her that there were all kinds, such as cooks, apothecaries, etc., before concluding that being an adventurer was the best. After all, you didn't get bossed around by anyone, and you could aim to become one at any age. Those words caught our protagonist's attention, and the man noticed it, so he asked her if she was thinking of becoming an adventurer, to which she calmly replied that it was one of the options she was considering. The man then turned serious and asked her where she was from, to which she replied, after some hesitation, that she was affiliated with that forest. The man then asked her if the owner of that forest was a person, and she quickly, and matter-of-factly, confirmed it. Right after, he asked her what her name was, and she finally introduced herself as Indra. Sometime later, Sword was yelling at the man who had hired him because he hadn't told him that the forest was noble property. Sword then explained that a territory was land granted to nobles by the country for them to manage, before adding that there were tons of places that could make money. Furthermore, if some unrelated guy barged into a place like that, he wouldn't be able to complain even if he got caught and killed, which was the reason for Sword's anger toward the man who had hired him. At that moment, the man who had hired Sword yelled back at him, saying that he didn't have a choice. After all, they were hearing insane rumbling noises every day until Sword started investigating. Not to mention that people had started saying it sounded like a dragon was nesting there. Nevertheless, that didn't appease Sword, who immediately retorted by asking the clerk if that was supposed to be a good reason for not telling him about the nobles owning the forest. The clerk then yelled that he thought it would be an easy fix since the one going was Thunderfang, an S-rank adventurer. With a dragon involved? Wow, that's being optimistic, even considering that Sword is an S-rank. After hearing that, Sword had to admit that he had also thought it would be an easy job. When he went there, he noticed that the huge boulders had been shattered. There were signs of landslides and depressions in the ground all over the place, which made him understand why they had thought a dragon had shown up. Unfortunately, or not, there wasn't even a trace of any monster except for one person, our protagonist. He then gave some explanation to the clerk about what had caused everything, and the other seemed to believe it. But when Sword asked the clerk if he knew a kid named Indra, the clerk's expression changed, and the adventurer noticed it. Right after, the clerk replied that knowing the kid was not even a question, before adding that she was Lady Indra Springcourt, the first daughter of the owner of that forest, who was from the noble house of Springcourt, which astonished Sword. Some time later, he returned to the forest and met with our protagonist while thinking that she couldn't be a noble's daughter. After all, she kept eating stuff without thinking. In fact, he told her again that she needed to be more cautious, before adding that she was so reckless that he couldn't even watch. However, she retorted by saying that she could do everything by herself, before adding that she could cook and knew some martial arts too. That surprised him, and he asked her if she was really aiming to become an adventurer, to which she replied that she didn't know yet, before adding that it was a job you could start at any age and do without relying on others. Immediately thereafter, he grabbed a small and wide branch from a tree and told her that he would test if she had what it took to become an adventurer. He then told her that he had guessed that she had been going to that mountain to train on her own, before adding that training alone every day should get boring. He then told her that he would fight her with the wooden stick in his hand, before asking her to fight with everything she had. He even told her that she could use the wooden sword at her waist, and she wondered if that was just a game of pretend sword fighting. However, she also knew that if he was really an adventurer, that was a good chance to test her own strength, so she agreed to spar with him. Almost immediately, the fight began, and even though he managed to block her attack, he realized that she had gone straight for his wrist without hesitation, which made him think that he had underestimated the kid. Furthermore, the amount of mana she had was inhuman, and she had a speed that even amazed him, an S-rank adventurer. So, he concluded that she was no ordinary noble lady. Still, the real question was what exactly she was. At that moment, he noticed that her mana was swelling up, and he quickly activated body enhancement. The fight continued, and suddenly she lifted into the air before attacking him. Moreover, even though he guessed her intention, she still managed to land a hit on his wrist, a powerful one. In fact, he thought that she might have busted a bone. Right after, he told her that he had given up while wondering if the kid would really stop. In fact, he decided to take a healing potion, just in case. Once he took it, he began to wonder what she would do, and shortly after, she simply asked him if he believed that she had what it took to be an adventurer. She even asked him if she believed that it would be impossible for her to become one, which left Sword completely flabbergasted. Still, after a moment, he yelled at her that she was too ridiculously overpowered, which baffled her. But she then asked him if that was really the first thing he needed to shout at her, to which the other replied that she shouldn't blame him for needing to say it. Right after, he explained to her that no matter how much she said that she practiced alone or that no one had ever watched her train, there should be a limit to those things. And Sword didn't stop there. He then told her that her speed and her strength, no matter how you looked at them, had already surpassed fully grown adults, to which she simply replied that she kinda had a feeling something was off, which left the adventurer flabbergasted. Immediately thereafter, Sword got serious and asked her a question of essence. He wanted to know if she was really a human. That question hurt our protagonist, but she still replied that the woman who had given birth to her was probably human, and as for the man, the most likely candidate was definitely human too. Luckily, Sword seemed to read the room and decided not to press further. He simply told her that he had gotten that she was seriously powerful, before addressing the other big issue by saying that she had absolutely zero common sense. Right after, she pouted and tried to defend herself by saying that she would be fine as long as she didn't interact with people. After all, by his reaction and words, she had guessed that she could indeed become an adventurer. Nevertheless, he quickly retorted by saying that thinking adventurers didn't need to interact with people just proved she really had no common sense, which made her throw a tantrum, which in turn made him feel exhausted. Suddenly, he grabbed our protagonist while telling her that if she really wanted to be an adventurer, he would train her a bit more, before adding, while showing a big smile, that it seemed like he had found himself a good sparring partner. At that moment, our protagonist got elated and told him that she had thought he was shady, but it turned out that he was a good guy. She then added that she was glad she didn't kill him, which made him wonder if he should just stop looking after the kid. The following day, he was walking through the forest to meet with Indra again while recalling that she had told him that, as thanks for the training, she would cook him a meal. He then thought that he had gone into town and bought some ingredients and stuff, which had caused him to run later than usual. Shortly after, he arrived at the usual spot and asked if our protagonist was there, but he then noticed that there was a watery sound coming from a certain direction. He then followed the sound and found Indra, naked, taking a bath while using a cloud she had created to rain over her. Now, he completely ignored the naked girl and focused on the fact that even though it was sunny, it was raining in just that one spot. Moreover, there was a stream rising, and he wondered if the rain was actually hot water. It was then that he finally noticed that the kid was bathing there and finally realized, thanks to his looking at inappropriate places, that our protagonist had been a girl the whole time, which completely baffled him. She then yelled at him, saying that she obviously looked like a girl. In fact, she got very angry and asked him what part of her looked even remotely like a boy. She even invited him to look closely at her. He then noticed that she had pale skin, a slender frame, big, round eyes, and a delicate, narrow face. Right after, he realized that she was indeed Lady Indra, the Count's daughter, and she got even more pissed before yelling at him that she was indeed Indra Springcourt. She then realized that he had thought she was just some boy using a fake name the entire time and didn't like it at all. He then asked her why a noble lady would have that kind of haircut. In fact, even among commoners, he had never seen a girl with hair that short, not once. Those words made her get serious, and he quickly asked her if someone had cut it off or something, to which she quickly replied that he had cut it off herself. Right after, she told him that she was really Indra, daughter of Count Springcourt, before adding that the head of the house, Count Kazuno Springcourt, despised her. She even explained that she didn't even have a personal attendant and that he refused to spend a single coin on her. In fact, the clothes she had were those he could see nearby. In short, even for haircuts, she had no choice but to do it herself. Immediately thereafter, she realized something and told him that she finally got it. He had mistaken her for a boy because of her short hair, which really made sense. In fact, he even admitted that perhaps that was it. The whole boy vibe might have been from the haircut. Did I mention the fact that she is still naked in front of him? Right after, he asked her what happened with that forest because it was only raining hot water in the spot where she was. He also asked her if she found it weird, to which she simply replied that it was not weird at all because she was the one making it rain. Eh? That makes it even odder. Obviously, that astonished the adventurer a lot, and he immediately yelled at her, asking her if she could use magic and how the heck she was even doing that kind of magic. Nevertheless, she remained calm and simply said that she had just confirmed that it was magic. After all, she hadn't learned it from anyone, so even if he asked her to explain, she wouldn't be able to. She then added that she had gone through every magic book she could find in the mansion, but they only talked about abstract concepts and such. So, after a lot of trial and error, she had figured out how to do it, which had been very tough. That shock soared beyond what he thought it could be possible, and he only managed to ask her if she was truly human. She then reminded him that it had been the fourth time he had asked her that, before adding that if he was saying that nobles were not human, then she was not human either. After all, she was the child of a duke's daughter and a count. It was then that he finally apologized for being so persistent and finally accepted that she was human. Sometime later, our protagonist met with Sword and apologized to him for being late. He then told her that he had taken there the ingredients and cooking tools she had asked for. After hearing that, she quickly moved away and told him to take them to a certain spot. Once they arrived at the designated place, the adventurer was surprised because the things he was seeing at that moment were not there the day before. She then explained that she was working on building it just a bit before, and since she had gotten dirty, she had taken a hot bath. He then began to laugh while telling her that she was going to treat him to a meal as thanks, before adding that he would be judging her skills too, and our protagonist agreed, before asking him to wait somewhere nearby. A while later, the meal was ready, and he had to admit that everything was delicious. In fact, he didn't hesitate to ask for seconds while thinking that Indra was casually using fire magic too. And it was then that he noticed something else. She was casting without an incantation. However, his attention was quickly dragged away by another thing, specifically by a bottle Indra was holding. He immediately asked her what it was, and she replied that it was liquor. That shocked the adventurer, who immediately called her an idiot, before telling her that she shouldn't waste alcohol on cooking. Nevertheless, our protagonist replied that the alcohol she was using was meant to be used in cooking, but he just couldn't accept it. He didn't understand why she was doing it and even called her a clueless brat before adding that doing what she was doing was such a waste. Of course, in the end, he revealed what lay underneath his words. He wanted to drink that alcohol. As for our protagonist, she just sighed and called him a hopeless adult. Still, he tried to snatch the bottle out of her hands, but she struggled to prevent it while insisting on the fact that the liquor was for cooking and asking him to back off. Nevertheless, he kept on insisting, and she kept on stopping him. She then explained that the content of the bottle was homemade alcohol she'd worked hard on, before adding that she was not just giving it away. Still, his attention was caught by something different, and he immediately asked her if she could brew alcohol, to which she replied that it was homemade before asking him if she would need a license to brew it. Sword then told her that she didn't need a license, but the issue was not it, but the fact that the method to brew alcohol was kept secret, which was why he was so surprised that she knew how to brew alcohol. Indra then explained that even though she knew, she hadn't succeeded on the first try. However, thanks to that, she had gotten better at magic. After hearing that, he realized that she basically had to abuse her crazy magic to make the stuff, and she added that if she didn't use magic, the failure rate went up. She then explained that fermentation and rot were two sides of the same coin, so using magic to sterilize and adjust the temperature regularly raised the success rate. Nevertheless, thanks to the hard work of brewing it, she was able to add depth to her cooking. At that moment, she reminded him that he should better eat quickly before it got cold, to which he only replied by asking her to give him the booze, too, which annoyed her a lot since she couldn't get what he was saying. She then asked him if she was even listening to her, to which he replied that he was listening super carefully. Indra then told him that alcohol, the component found in booze, was highly addictive. However, he told her not to lecture him with her smarty pants talk because he wouldn't get addicted, to which she replied that he already was. I agree. Every addict says they will be fine. Still, in the end, she complied and gave him one last tearful cup while telling him that it had taken a ton of effort and relentless hard work to make it. Unfortunately, he had stopped listening from the very moment he had the cup in his hands. Shortly after, he told her that, even though he might not act like it, he was an adult. He then added that he would make sure to properly repay her for the booze she had given to him. Immediately thereafter, he thought that everything she asked him to get was just regular stuff that even a kid could grab on an errand in town. Sadly, she was in a situation where she couldn't even get that. In the end, Sword told her that he would get her all the tools she needed to become an adventurer. After hearing that, she was so pleased that she gave him the bottle while thinking that it was a win-win situation. Still, he asked her if she was sure about not becoming a chef. After all, she could also brew booze and sell it. In fact, he told her that it would be a waste not to use a skill like that. After hearing that, she simply replied that she was still a little girl. Therefore, there was no way she could run a business. Even though she lacked common sense, as he had told her, she still understood that the world was not full of people like him. Right after, she added that if she managed to survive until adulthood, perhaps she would consider it. After hearing that, he proposed a deal to her. She would sell the booze she made to him. Nevertheless, she refused by saying that most of it was being made by the kitchen staff of the estate where she lived. So, since they were the ones preparing the ingredients in space, she couldn't just take things on her own. Sword then asked her to take him to those people at that moment, but she immediately refused because that would get her in trouble. In the end, she agreed to try to find a way to work something out to sell him just a little. However, he should be prepared to wait at least a year, since alcohol tastes better when it is aged. Obviously, with that information, he asked him about the liquor she had already given to him, and she explained that it was an immature early batch with a low level of quality that was fine for cooking. Nevertheless, instead of getting mad, he immediately asked her to sell him her rejects for the time being. In exchange, he would help her, and a year from that moment, she would sell him her good stuff, or she would let him handle the brewing. After hearing that, she panicked and told her not to go to the estate. Otherwise, things would get complicated. In return, she would sell him her share of the booze. He agreed to those terms, and shortly after, he told her that he would head home. At that moment, she noticed that he was carrying a bag and asked him what it was, to which he replied that it was a magic bag, a magical tool. He then explained that the inside had been expanded with magic, so it held more than it looked. Moreover, the one he was carrying didn't use any magic power. Shortly after, he gave her a pocket watch as a token of appreciation for that day's food and booze. Our protagonist quickly grabbed the watch and got elated while seeing it. Right after, she told him that even though he looked like a scruffy, smelly old man, he was actually a good guy, which annoyed him. Sometime later, our protagonist was pudding while having various bumps on her head. She then asked if she truly was the cause of the roaring noise in the forest. Right after, she added that calling her the culprit sounded rather harsh. After all, she was merely training, and in the process, for some reason, landslides happened. The ground caved in, and giant trees shattered. In short, she was not making the noise on purpose. However, after hearing that, Sword thought that what she had said was exactly what they called being the cause. Afterward, they resumed their training, but even though our protagonist looked very strong, she ended up getting easily beaten by the adventurer. She then pouted while thinking that, at first, she thought she could win, but that was only because Sword let his guard down. Nevertheless, against the adventurer, when he was not letting his guard down, she hadn't won even once. At that moment, Sword told her that her last move was pretty good, but her follow-through was weak. That pissed our protagonist off, and she wondered why her attacks were being read so easily. He even considered the possibility that he had something like Mind's Eye or some similar ability. However, she couldn't deny that he had been looking for her and training her all that past year. Right after, he told her that he had stopped wasting strength when applying force, but her brute force tendencies still stood out. So, she had to work on that. At that moment, she looked at him with admiration and admitted to herself that she respected him just a little. On the other hand, he told her that, in the end, what she used wasn't really magic, which confused her. He then explained that magic was something that used the mana you had within yourself. However, the amount of mana a person could hold varied from individual to individual. Originally, by chanting a spell, you could release your internal mana and temporarily manifest it, but our protagonist's case was completely different. She was using a component called magic particles that existed in the atmosphere, or so it seemed. After hearing that, she said that she finally understood why nothing had happened even when she tried chanting, which he quickly confirmed before asking her if the booze was ready. Our protagonist didn't like that question, but she was aware that it had been almost a year, which meant that it was a good time. She then told him that she would head back to the mansion and get some before warning him against following her. However, sometime later, they were walking together through the forest, and she told him that even though she had warned him against following her, he hadn't listened and was sneaking along, to which he replied that he was just curious. Nevertheless, she didn't buy that explanation and asked him if he was trying to win over the cooks, to which he replied that he just wanted to drink some booze. That pissed her off, and she said that he should at least act a little guilty and stop following her so brazenly. Still, in the end, she stopped caring and decided to just go all in. Shortly after, they arrived in the kitchen, and the cooks quickly recognized both of them. Right after, our protagonist asked them how the booze they had prepared was, to which they replied that it had been all prepared just as she had instructed. Later, Indra and Sword were disguised, trying to sneak out of the estate, and she told him that doing that with them was a hassle, to which he replied, while laughing, that they at least had gotten the booze without any trouble, which was a win somehow. Immediately thereafter, she presented him with the promised drink, before telling him that, one way or another, she owed him for all he had done. Right after, she added that it would taste better if she let it age a bit more, but she was aware that he wouldn't listen. He then thanked her and said that he would give her the tools she had asked for that adventurers needed after that. Almost immediately, he bid her farewell before saying that he was heading out and patting her head. Then, he asked her to go with him. After all, he knew that she was planning to leave the mansion. Right after, he added that even like that, he was a decent adventurer. So, if she went with him, he would teach her what she needed to know. Nevertheless, despite being touched by his words, she tried to act cool and told him that she was still only 7 years old. So, the proposal had arrived about 3 years earlier than planned. However, he quickly replied that plans always arrived with a few detours. That pissed her off, and she told him that she couldn't just leave right away. After all, even if she was basically freeloading there, she still needed to prepare a few things. After hearing that, he backed down and told her that he would go gather the gear he wanted to give her, to which she replied, while smiling with confidence, that he should wait for her at the usual spot. The chefs were shocked as they were told the sake brewing would end here. Indra apologized for the sudden news and let them know that she had decided to leave the mansion. She was surprised as they took off their hats and thanked her for the blessings they had received through her wisdom. Our protagonist looked a bit sad. Then, she told them they were free to do as they liked with the remaining sake, and she wouldn't stop them from brewing more in the future. However, she advised them to keep the brewing method secret. She also remarked that they were like Sword. They'd rather drink something decent right away than wait for it to age into something truly fine. The cooks laughed at her comment, knowing they were just a bunch of drunkards. She was shocked at how quickly they accepted that and backed down. One of them mentioned that Sword had already informed them that he'd be taking Indra with him someday. So, he advised them to think about what to do afterward. Indra was shocked as she realized Sword wasn't as careless and unplanned as she thought. Before she left, the cooks wished her a well stay for many years to come and a happy life. Immediately after, Indra thought about their words. This world wasn't full of people like Sword. So, who knew whether she could live for many years? While thinking of the last thing she had to do, our protagonist saw the butler. She addressed him as Hannibal, and he seemed shocked by her appearance. Then she asked about the whereabouts of the Count, letting him know she needed to say farewell before departing. Hannibal then informed Count Springcourt that our protagonist had come to give her parting greetings. The Count was confused as his daughter walked in. Indra greeted him, saying she was pleased to see he was in good health, and then informed him that she had decided to finally bid farewell to the mansion, and to mark the occasion she had come to collect a small token of celebration. Looking at her, Count Springcourt was shocked. He questioned whether she was truly Indra. Seeing her hair, he wondered if she was a man all along. Indra didn't find his remark quite funny. But it didn't matter in the slightest now. Then she repeated herself, demanding he hand over the money. She figured he'd be happy to be rid of her, once their ties were over. The Count questioned what right she had, and she immediately told him it was child support. This was what she was supposed to be given by right, the inheritance from the Duke's daughter, who married into the house and gave birth to her. Our protagonist asked the Count to return what he had embezzled. The Count was sweating coldly, realizing he'd been caught in a tough spot. Afterward, Hannibal brought some items before Indra. This was the inheritance she was meant to receive, along with the child support she was owed and the madam's jewelry. The Count immediately yelled at Hannibal, but the butler explained that Indra could no longer endure the mistreatment from the Count and his wife. Hence, she became physically and mentally weakened and collapsed. However, our protagonist made a miraculous recovery, and afterward she decided she wanted to leave here under her own power. Hannibal told the Count that the only thing he could do now was see her off with good grace. Regardless, the Count was seething with anger. He forcefully grabbed the money, refusing to give it to Indra. So she kicked him, causing him to throw it into the air, and then she caught it. At the same time, Hannibal helped her put everything together. Immediately after, Primrose burst into the room, feeling sad that her big sister was leaving. She complained that if Indra were gone, she wouldn't be able to blame things on her anymore. Yeah, someone needs to get this kid's head checked. Our protagonist offered to reconsider if her little sister and father disappeared from this mansion. Primrose was shocked by her words, and so Indra left as her little sister yelled at her to get out. While running through the forest, memories of all the bad things she had experienced in the mansion flashed through her mind, making her sad once more. Afterward, Sword approached her, noting that she was quicker than expected and gave her a warm smile. Indra told him that it all went smoothly, thanks to him. She added that on the way, the headmaid also gave her a farewell gift. With that, she was ready to head out with full energy. But Sword told her to hold on and handed her some clothes. Immediately afterward, as she was changing, he asked if she was ready yet. Our protagonist burned her old raggedy clothes, and with everything set, they were ready to head out. Sword held out his hand, telling her not to let go this time. She let him know that even though she was a little girl, she'd been educated as a lady as well. She still didn't get why they had to hold hands in the first place. Sword laughed, telling her she wasn't exactly the refined lady type. I mean, she grew up in the forest. He couldn't really expect much. He patted her head, telling her they really needed to go because the sun was about to set. Then, they set off to the dazzling world of adventure. It had been a month since they set out, climbing up and down mountains like some kind of wild training, and pushing their way through paths that didn't even exist. Indra's eyes widened in relief as they finally reached a place where people actually lived. It felt like they could just keep living in the mountains at this point. The thought had crossed her mind, but that was not their goal. They were wandering the lands after all, and they went out of their way to rake in piles of gold for this journey. It would have been wasted treasure otherwise. Sword noticed that, although it had been weeks since they'd been to a village, yet somehow they looked pretty tidy. Our protagonist made sure to shower every single day, but she still couldn't wait to finally soak in a proper bath. She had also forced Sword to do it too because filth was the enemy. And besides, she told him, smelly old men were hated. She noticed his grim expression and started staring at him. Before she could laugh, he grabbed her by the neck, letting her know she was as uncute as ever. Indra complained about the way he was treating a lady such as herself, but replied that a lady wouldn't call a gentleman a smelly old man. She was fuming, calling him awful for an old man. But she didn't even know how old he was in the first place. At the city's gate, the guard asked them to show their adventurer cards. Upon seeing Sword's card, the guard freaked out. Sword then told him that he would vouch for Indra's identity since they were planning on getting her registered at the guild. As they passed through the gates, the guards were still staring at him and smiling. Afterward, our protagonist asked him to explain the current customs to her. He told her that most towns had checkpoints at the gates for security. They would ask who one was, why they came, and when they planned to leave. What he showed earlier was an adventurer card, which was issued by the guild and also served as proof of identity, basically like a driver's license. He added that once she showed that, She would usually get waved through. Indra was then amazed as she saw the town of Ys. The city was vibrant with vendors selling different items, kids playing around, and others sitting down to have a drink. Sword warned Indra that she'd get lost if she zoned out, but she already knew to head for the Adventurers Guild if that happened. Sword remarked that she didn't have a shred of childishness in her. Immediately after, they arrived at the Adventurers Guild. The size of a guild depended on the town, but the basic layout didn't change much. One would apply for requests at the reception desk, which also served as the counter for all sorts of procedures adventurers might need. Once an adventurer got used to it, they'd check the posted requests and sign up for themselves. Since lots of adventurers gathered at the guild, one could pick up information there too. But first, Indra needed to head somewhere else. While trying to sign a document, she noticed the ink from the pen was quite unusual. Sword explained that it was a special kind of ink to prevent forgery. The man attending to them also advised her to be careful, not just about lying, but also about making mistakes when filling it out. Once the document was filled out, he'd take it. After that, our protagonist was given her adventurer card. Staring at it, she seemed confused and noted that it looked different from the card Sword had. He told her there was no way a newbie's card would look the same as his. The other adventurers behind them started whispering about Indra's ignorance, mocking her for it. Our protagonist snapped, letting Sword know it was his job to explain things properly to her. He looked completely tired of dealing with this little brat. Well, who wouldn't? He then explained to Indra that his type of card was special, unlike hers. She assumed he had committed a crime to get the card, but Sword grabbed her by the neck for making such clueless assumptions. As Indra struggled, she asked if he planned on grabbing her every time because she was worried he would scratch her soft, flawless skin. She also pointed out that Sword said he would teach her all this stuff. Besides, she was still just a 7-year-old little girl. He then put her down, admitting that she was still quite young. After that, he told her this was where they would part ways. Our protagonist froze, looking lost. Sword mentioned that, though he might not look like it, he was kind of a big deal. Showing his adventurer card, he let her know that compared to a freshly registered rookie like her, the difference was like heaven and earth. So, he couldn't keep babysitting her. There were plenty of adventurers here. He then told Indra to find companions who suited her, form her own party, and take on quests together with them. At least until she reached C rank, he didn't want to see her face. Now, this is what we, in the industry, would call an asshole move. He thought she had an oddly world-weary way about her, and she had talent enough to be called a genius. But still, she was only 7 years old. He didn't want her to walk the same path he did, so abandoning her would be better. Sword wanted Indra to make friends of her own age, not just adults, gain all kinds of experiences as an adventurer, and find comrades she could truly trust, even if she ended up hating him. I mean, you kind of teaching her not to trust people by abandoning her like that. It would have been better if you have left her in the mansion. Meanwhile, our protagonist, who still looked very confused, suddenly burst into laughter. She finally saw things were just as she thought. She felt no one in this world could truly be trusted. Our protagonist then slowly walked away from him. Sword leaned on the wall, realizing that more than being hated, there was also being looked down on with contempt. On the other hand, our protagonist was thinking about how she knew it all along. People in this world had no consideration for others. If there was nothing in it for them, they wouldn't even lift a finger. She knew that all too well, and it had burned into her. Frustrated, she scratched her head, realizing she had messed up. After putting herself together, she went to the lady at the counter, who was immediately captivated by Indra's cute appearance. Indra asked the lady if she could teach her a little about something, and the lady was happy to oblige. Seeing that she was G rank, Indra couldn't take requests above her current rank. The lady explained that this was how it worked, and as she builds achievements, Indra's rank would go up. Eventually, she'd be able to take on tougher quests. According to the lady, the guild could appraise and buy items even if they weren't tied to a quest. But if the guild wasn't involved, the danger level was completely unknown, so she didn't recommend it, and it usually didn't count much toward rank achievements. At G rank, our protagonist could take on standing quests such as herb gathering, plus things like trash collecting and cleaning. She asked if standing quests didn't have a time limit, and the lady confirmed it, saying she could take as long as she wanted or finish the quest quickly. It was less hassle to gather a lot of herbs at once, but if the herbs lose freshness, the quest would fail. The lady added that it was also good to split work among several people and offered to introduce Indra to a good party. However, our protagonist refused because she didn't trust people in this world. So, she would never team up with anyone. Yep, that's what happened when all the people you trust just abandon and/or mistreat you. The receptionist seemed confused and tried to explain. Then, Indra noticed the people behind her and figured the receptionist was trying to tell her that they had already prepared new companions for her. Our protagonist thanked her and told her to forget about it. She saw it as a shady recruitment targeting newbies. Then, she left the guild building. Immediately afterward, she found her herb as she set out. There was a bigger patch of it near town than she expected, so transporting them wouldn't be a problem since she had a magic bag. Then, she got an idea. Casting a powerful magic from her finger, she managed to gather all the herbs in one place. Now, she could harvest them all at once. With this, she would be able to rank up to F in no time. Our protagonist felt proud that she could do anything by herself. Soon after, she ran into a problem. There were too many weeds mixed in with the herbs, and sorting them out would take way too long. Cutting the stems also made the freshness fade faster than she thought. She would just have to improve her method little by little. Indra could finally become an adventurer. There was nothing she couldn't do now. Later on, Sword was being scolded by a man because of what he had said to our protagonist. His spirit was crushed. The girl beside him apologized for messing up too, and he said it was because she rushed things a little too much. But the other man still blamed Sword for the way he phrased things. He explained it was so out of character to try to help Indra make friends. Friends were something that happened naturally, but since Sword was a loner, he didn't even know how to make friends. Sword tried to argue that sometimes knocking someone down a little was what made them climb back up, but the man told him it was more like he wrote her off. Immediately afterward, they went to the Adventurers Guild and found out our protagonist had accepted a gathering request. It looked like a few other parties tried to call out to her afterwards, but they didn't give her the time of day. Considering the guy she was relying on up until now just abruptly left her, she wasn't about to cozy up to someone else. Not much for being a reliable senior. The guilt crept up on Sword more and more because if Indra was mentally weaker, she might have just ended herself after what he did. Afterward, he went to the gates, and a guard called to him asking if Indra would be okay going out alone. It was already getting dark, and the gates closed at midnight. The guard informed Sword that she had gone to pick herbs, and it seemed like she was planning to come back to town tomorrow. He was worried that she might be planning to camp out in the forest. When the two guards had tried to stop her, our protagonist turned to them, saying there was no way she would sleep in town at night. She was too scared of what people in this world might do to her. The guards were scared she might run into a monster. And since she had her adventurer card, they couldn't stop her. If only they had explained things to her more clearly. Sword realized Indra had gone past contempt and ended up with full-blown distrust of people. They needed to get her to start trusting people before even making friends. There were monsters around the woods with a B-rank threat level. Sword feared what would happen if she were alone and got attacked while asleep. Suddenly, he felt a huge mana reacting and hoped she was safe. Meanwhile, our protagonist was dozing without a care in the world. This kid doesn't even have a sense of survival. As Sword found her, he looked disappointed to see her asleep. He wondered why the hell she hadn't been attacked. The least she could do was use a barrier spell or something. His expression became furious. But with no other choice, he decided to watch over Indra. Still, he wouldn't save her right away if a monster attacked. Thinking of how our protagonist couldn't trust people, Sword's thoughts drifted to the past. One of the chefs back at the mansion told him that Indra was in a very painful position. Although her mother had passed away, Indra was the legitimate daughter. So, the chef felt she should rightfully be free to live in the estate. However, the Count favored Lady Primrose, his illegitimate child. Sword thought it was the kind of story you hear all the time among nobles because of what he saw of her. Indra had gone from having an innocent smile, calling him a smelly old man, to having a dead look in her eyes, realizing she couldn't trust anyone in this world. He also recalled the words his comrade had told him. Our protagonist then woke up fully rested the next morning. On the other hand, Sword didn't get a wink of sleep. In the end, not a single monster showed up. Not like it was a bad thing, but he thought Indra was still awfully carefree and completely unaware of how he felt. Our protagonist then got dressed and proceeded to gather up some herbs with her magic. After she turned them in at the Adventurers Guild, she returned to the forest to gather more. Sword watched this go on for a couple of days. Our protagonist kept at this. At the Adventurers Guild, some people tried making fun of her, asking how her weeding was going and if she got dumped by her S-rank adventurer partner. Sword saw how she settled in the forest, only coming back to town to fulfill requests. And she completely ignored those who taunted her, no matter what they said. According to another receptionist, our protagonist planned to leave ES after reaching F rank. The first receptionist who handled her was being avoided, and the lady assumed Indra hated her. Since our protagonist would never hear out Sword if he apologized, he asked Sangha to mediate. Sangha tried to explain that Sword only acted out of concern for her, and that he tended to be clumsy, but he regretted how things turned out this time. She turned to him, trying to remember who he was talking about, and referred to Sword as that self-proclaimed important person. She really doesn't give a damn about him anymore. She asked Sangha what it was exactly that she was supposed to be forgiving, because she didn't recall having anything like that to begin with. Afterward, Sangha returned to Sword, asking how he could tell a kid carrying so much darkness inside that they could never trust people and that the world had no value at all. Sword wondered what the hell he was supposed to do. Sangha told him he was hopeless. To begin with, he dragged a sheltered, noble girl to a commoner's town, and then right there, he decided to part ways with her. Plus, he only thought of it as teaching her a little humility. Sangha yelled at him because Sword had always said that things went way past mere insensitivity, and this was why people hated him. Afterward, those words continued to echo in Sword's mind as he suddenly came across Indra, who was face to face with a giant wolf. As the giant wolf growled fiercely, Sword noted it was a B-ranked threat-level monster. So, he considered stepping in to help our protagonist. Meanwhile, she called the wolf, telling it that if it didn't come at her first, then she had no reason to kill it. The monster grew more agitated and suddenly lunged at her. In that moment, our protagonist used her sword to slice off its head in one attack. Well, at least, she warned the stupid monster. As its head landed on the ground, Indra wondered if she could sell it if she took it back. At least, she'd have to drain the blood first. But the opening of her magic bag was way too small. On the other hand, Sword realized that it was an instant kill. He might get the same treatment if he's not careful this time. At the Adventurers Guild, a protagonist showed the wolf head to the receptionist, telling her to buy it. The other adventurers started speculating whether she really took down the monster alone, even though she never teamed up with anyone. After receiving her reward, one of the adventurers demanded that she hand over the money. He accused her of stealing his prey and asked her to hand over the cash immediately. While others laughed, Sword felt something off as Indra drew her sword. She threatened to cut off the guy's head and compare it to the cut on the monster he just sold to prove it was his. The adventurer was underestimating her and asked if her parents had never taught her how to use a knife. He doubted she'd be able to make a clean cut with a wooden sword. Just as she was about to slice him, Sword jumped in to block her attack. He struggled as the force of the attack was a lot for him, and his eyes widened in fear as he called out Indra's name. She looked at him with a confused expression. Immediately after, he cast body reinforcement multiple times on himself. Then, she began attacking him relentlessly. Once he read her attacks, they were easy to predict. That was why, during training, as long as he stayed alert, he could handle it. But that was only because neither of them was fighting seriously. Suddenly, our protagonist jumped and kicked Sword. He realized that right now, she was trying to kill him. She ended up this way because of him. So, he didn't know how to go all out against her. Then Sangha yelled at them, letting them know they'd be fined for violating guild rules if they continued. Our protagonist claimed the fine only applied to the two guys, since all she did was try to prove that she really hunted the monster. Sangha admitted that the real one at fault was the guy who threw and broke guild property. With that settled, Indra left. Afterward, Sangha couldn't believe Sword was actually being pushed back by her. Sword admitted he still had the edge in speed, but in power, he and Indra were even. And when it came to magic, she was chantless. Seeing the kind of person he cut ties with, Sangha wondered who would stop her if she caused trouble. He asked Sword to keep her under control, even if he had to tie a rope around her neck. Later, at the gate, the guard asked Indra if she was going gathering again, but she let him know she was leaving town. He advised her to be careful because she looked so cute and could be mistaken for a target. But remembering the wolf head she showed this morning, he figured there was no need to worry. Our protagonist asked him for recommendations on where to head next, and the guard pointed her in the direction of a town called Laurel. It was prosperous, and the guild there had plenty of requests. Suddenly, she took the opposite direction, telling the guard that the right move was to do the opposite of what people in this world recommended. As our protagonist set out, her feet were suddenly caught by a magic trap. She thought this kind of thing should shatter in an instant. The next second, Sword lunged toward her, begging for her forgiveness and crying. Indra was disgusted. She couldn't believe he was just clinging to her leg. He admitted it was all his fault and begged desperately for her forgiveness. She slapped him because the sight was gross to her. For a second, Sword tried to make sense of what just happened. Then, he started crying and apologizing again, but Indra wanted him to get away. He promised to let go if she forgave him, but that was more of a threat than a promise. He explained that he didn't betray her. He never intended to bring her to town and just abandon her. Sword had thought the gap between them was too big for him to teach her properly. After all, he was an S rank, and she was a clueless beginner. This guy isn't even making his case better. Sword tried to explain what an S rank meant, but our protagonist figured it was a title given to those within A rank whose achievements and skills were officially recognized. Sword had wanted her to team up with people of a similar rank and learn what being an adventurer was like. Sangha was the guildmaster of the town and easygoing. So, Sword pulled some strings on her behalf to make things easier for her. Basically, his plan was to bring her to East, split up temporarily, and form a party with girls of similar age recommended by the guild. Then she'd make typical beginner mistakes, learn from them, and complete quests. After getting enough experience, he would reform a team with her. He also felt she'd get cocky if she was surrounded by adults and try to act older than she was. Our protagonist didn't even know where to start. She told him that friends came naturally, and just because she was a loner didn't mean randomly being assigned someone would make one click with them. Sword burst into more tears, telling her not to call him a loner too. She also asked why he never explained the plan to her. He basically deceived a noble girl who knew nothing about any of it, and left her stranded in a town she didn't know. If that was the case, he should have followed the original plan, spent 3 years doing reconnaissance, and prepared thoroughly. Our protagonist felt it would have been better if she had left on her own. Looking at her, Sword humbly apologized to Indra. She felt a bit nervous, asking why he didn't explain things in the first place if he was really looking out for her. Sword suddenly started shaking all over and then burst out saying he panicked. Indra was stunned. He confessed that he actually kind of liked her and admitted there was no way she was at the same level as a low-level party. But Sangha made him cook up that plan. Since he didn't know how to explain it, he ended up pushing her away. He clung to her, decided that he would just take care of her by himself. He claimed to be her mentor, but our protagonist had never once asked him to be her mentor. Her swordsmanship and magic were self-taught anyway. So, Sword was only good for being the master of cluelessness. Regardless, she understood he didn't dump her for no reason and had now reflected on his actions. She then gave him a soft smile. Now that she knew his reasons, she wouldn't mind joining the girls' party and learning while they laughed and squealed together. She still found girls more tolerable than old men. Sword remarked she was really awful. Back at the Adventurers Guild, Sangha saw that Sword and our protagonist had made up. Indra told him that she finally realized it wasn't a scam that preyed on newly minted clueless adventurers. Sangha was shocked that she hadn't even understood that. Afterward, Sword quickly dodged a dagger that was aimed at his head. Indra mocked him as a self-proclaimed big shot who was ordering the reception lady around. The receptionist then yelled at him to get away from our protagonist. She then reminded Indra about the guy who got tangled up with her and almost had his head chopped off. Apparently, they had revoked his adventurer's license. It just occurred to our protagonist that there was someone like that. But from now on, he could never operate as an adventurer again. Indra felt this would only apply in ES, and the guy could just re-register elsewhere. But Sword told her not to underestimate the guild. Once they revoked a license, They would notify every guild at once. Our protagonist asked what would happen if the one who got revoked used disguises or false names. Sword explained to her that even if she changed her appearance, she was still her same self, and he was still the same as well. Adventurer cards were magical items, no matter what changed. They still recognized the person, and the guild magic items worked the same way. Our protagonist remarked that it was like a private network and biometric authentication. It was surprisingly cutting edge in a weird way. The others were confused, but she told them that she was just talking to herself. Still, seeing that biometrics were the norm, she complimented that magic items were really amazing. Sword asked if that was something worth watching, and she asked him to take care of a matter for her, calling him a self-proclaimed big shot again. Sword then asked Sangha to give our protagonist the mana fluid. Magic circles were always drawn on magical tools. According to Sword, the magic circle was excellent, and it wouldn't come off no matter how much one rubbed or washed it. In other words, the biometrics in this world and the private network systems and other convenient items, such as the magic tools, were like electronic machines from the other world our protagonist used to live in. She suspected that magic circles were the programs that made magical tools operate. So, if you had a dictionary of the symbols that made up a magic circle and the mana fluid, she could draw magic circles too, and even make magical tools. Normally, one would apprentice to a mage or something like that, and it seemed there was no such thing as a dictionary of magic circles. Indra thought it was a pain, and she didn't want to do it. So she thought she'd analyze how to make the mana fluid instead. But in the end, Sword told her that she'd have to apprentice to a mage even to learn how to make the mana fluid. He told her that the idea of casually making magical tools was absurd. However, only clocks were relatively inexpensive and easy to get. Those were made because the mages said they wanted to create a standard for this world. They persuaded the king at the time, and, after spending enormous money and time, achieved that long-cherished goal. So to promote widespread use, the manufacturing method was published, and with government backing, they were easy to obtain. Other magical items were sold by their makers, so they were insanely expensive. Sangha couldn't believe it, and still asked if our protagonist was seriously saying that if she had mana fluid, then she could make magical tools. He was basically asking the same thing as Sword. She told him that they wouldn't know until they tried. So first, they needed to analyze the mana fluid. However, Sangha said it was not something he could just hand over easily. Sword agreed, but then he pulled out his adventurer's card demanding that Sangha hand it over. Sangha was visibly upset. He nearly exploded in rage, but all he could do was sigh. Then, he told Sword and Indra to come. They went behind the counter and past the receptionist into the guildmaster's room. In the room, Sangha took them to a cupboard that was locked with chains. As he placed his hand on an orb, our protagonist was amazed, seeing the chains open up. Inside, she saw the shiny bottle of mana fluid. When Sangha handed it over, he told our protagonist to at least tell him the analysis results. She noted that she could just apprentice herself to a mage. Plus, they didn't even know if it could be analyzed in the first place. Besides, she had prepared a gift in return. She then gave him a liquor called brandy. Sangha remarked that even after running away, she was still a noble's child. He then noted her refined gesture. Indra told him that it was strong stuff, advising him not to chug it all down. However, he was looking forward to it. Meanwhile, Sword desperately stared at the bottle, and his expression grew more disturbed. Eventually, he started shouting and dived toward the bottle, demanding Sangha to give it back. They both let him know that the drink didn't belong to him. But Sword's addiction was worse than a kid's. Sangha claimed he could still get as much booze as he wanted, but Sword explained that this wasn't just some liquor nobles had lying around. He then told Sangha that Indra brewed it. The guildmaster was shocked hearing that our protagonist could brew alcohol. Sword also added that her stuff tasted amazing, and the one she gave him was top class among them. She remarked that if it were something simple like what was already on the market, then anyone could brew it. But as Sword said, the one she gave Sangha couldn't be made without magic. Sword angrily asked Indra why she had to use that, arguing that any other bottle would have been fine. She told him that the mana fluid came from a sealed shelf, so if it was that valuable, then she had to return something of equal worth. While they argued, Songa still held onto the liquor bottle. Sword started crying like a wimp, admitting that he was wrong to push Indra away. He then asked her to give him some booze. And you'd think this guy wasn't dropped on the head as a child. Immediately afterward, they left the guild with a bottle of liquor in Sword's hand. At this point, our protagonist was starting to think he was just a toddler. And she wouldn't be wrong. Meanwhile, Sword glared at the bottle with love, remarking that he could survive one more day with this. Still, Indra didn't think they'd come back to this town after all this time. She was thinking of leaving town. Sword reminded her that she wanted to do some sightseeing and advised her to try tasting ordinary civilian life instead of living in the woods all the time. However, she refused to sleep in a place crawling with people from this world. It was obvious that she really didn't trust people. Sword admitted that there were definitely scumbags like the ones who hassled them at the guild, and he also understood that her parents were awful. But he explained that not everyone in the whole world was like that. The way she said it made him feel like she once lived in a world that wasn't this one. Indra was silent to that remark, making Sword worried that it might actually be true. Moreover, her birth was real, and he reminded her of when she said she nearly died. When Indra, the daughter of Count Springcourt, died, he asked if she had come from another world and took over her body. The idea of another world was outlandish, but corpse possession, taking over a dead person's body, worked like that. Our protagonist didn't really understand it herself. When she was 5, she nearly died of wasting away, and at that time, she had a dream. In that world, she was just a commoner, not a noble or anything. It wasn't that she was special. In the country she lived in, there were no class differences. It was a country that boasted top-tier cleanliness and safety in the world. If someone was in trouble, there were lots of people who would help for free without expecting anything in return. They had no hesitation about doing things for others. They all had a spirit of compassion toward others. But there were no people like that in the present world. She also had memories of Indra Springcourt from before that. As for the other world, she only had fragmentary knowledge, and she couldn't remember names or ages. Our protagonist also told Sword that the knowledge she used to brew the alcohol came from that other world. She already understood that he didn't have malicious intent toward her. But between the guys who hassled her and the ones who egged them on, it was true that people in this world were selfish and shallow. And that was why she had decided on one thing. Hearing this, Sword had a bad feeling. She had decided that when she died, she wanted to make sure she never got born into this world again. She would use the great forbidden magic banned in her previous world to destroy this world and then die. Sword immediately thought she was totally screwed up. She promised to destroy the world before he'd even feel pain or fear. Sword looked at her and, while patting her head, he told her that he didn't think it was something worth throwing away that completely. She got angry, telling him to say whatever he had to say. So, he told her that she still didn't know this world. That was exactly why she bolted out of the mansion, and she couldn't help but agree. So, for the first time, he decided they'd be staying overnight at an inn. Indra felt like the word inn really felt super RPG-like. But Sword didn't even know what an RPG was. He told her it was fine to be excited, but she needed to get to bed soon. But Indra told him that she wasn't that much of a child. Since he was an S rank, they could stay at a high-ranked inn, but this time he picked an ordinary inn for her sake. Immediately afterward, they arrived at the location. Getting inside, our protagonist noted that it didn't look very spacious and was more like a rundown youth hotel. Sword let her know that even if he called it ordinary, it was still an inn that G ranks couldn't stay at all. She was still really excited, wondering if inns did things like pafu pafu or other evening entertainments. Sword then questioned what on earth she'd been talking about this whole time. As they got into the room, Indra immediately turned back to the door, saying it was absolutely impossible for her to stay. Sword tried to explain to her that, normally, the best place she could have stayed was an overcrowded, sardine-packed bunkhouse. But our protagonist started crying because it was scary, and she wanted to go back to the forest. Sword immediately carried her and canceled his stay at the inn. Immediately after, he ran through the town, and he arrived at a much better inn. As he presented his adventurer's card, he asked the receptionist to give him their best room. The room was sparkling and much more spacious than the previous one. Sword asked Indra how she felt about this one, and when she looked up, a huge gust of wind blew into the room through the windows. Our protagonist noted that it was disinfected, the laundry checked out, and the cleaning was done. Like this, she thought it would be okay somehow. However, she told Sword that from now on they should sleep under the stars because it was more comfortable outside than in this filthy room. He remarked that if there was someone around who could casually fire off spells like that just because the room was dirty, monsters wouldn't bother attacking. She responded to him, saying that monsters were smarter than humans in that way because they understood the difference in strength. Still, she felt really bad for making him spend money and then not staying. But it was just impossible for her. She felt like there was definitely some kind of enemy of humanity there. Sword thought she had finally started to give off that proper young lady, marriageable age vibe. But he didn't expect her to be crying over something as minor as a dirty room. The thought made Indra start crying again, remarking that it was dirty, cramped, and scary. That was rich coming from someone who mostly slept in the woods. Sword comforted her and asked her to stop crying. The next day, at the Adventurers Guild, Sanga suddenly ran to our protagonist, asking her how she made that liquor. This was the perfect timing for her because she wanted to talk to him about that, but it was something they could talk about here. Immediately after, they went into Sanga's office, where they asked him to arrange a warehouse to make alcohol. He complained about how they'd come with another impossible request, but Sword argued it would be a problem if outsiders snuck in and stole things. So, he asked if it wouldn't be best to have the guild manage it. Sanga asked about the merchant's warehouse, fearing he'd be in a lot of trouble if merchants found out. He then decided to arrange it, and Sword was shocked at how easily he agreed. Manufacturing needed frequent cleaning and quality checks, but our protagonist said to leave it to her. She pointed out that the tools in this world were made far too sloppily. The barrels they used when they first brewed liquor leaked, and about 8% of the barrels were like that, but the mansion's cooks managed to make them solid enough to actually use. She felt it'd be faster and more reliable to beg them and buy wine at a high price. Sanga then asked if she could buy alcohol if she went there, and she told him that she gave permission to do as they liked, so it was up to the cooks. The brandy she gave them yesterday wasn't stocked there. The one she made couldn't be brewed without magic. In the future, if they can make magical tools like that, it might become possible. But she was asking for too much perfection because the cook were tilting their heads, as if they were asking what was wrong with this. Sword wanted to taste one of those failed batches they were selling. So, our protagonist decided to give him a small cup. As he expected, the drink being chilled really changed the flavor. Indra remarked that the aroma got weaker, especially since this one had been opened several times for cooking. Meanwhile, Sanga yelled that it was so good, it was easy to drink chilled, and the aroma was wonderful. Seeing that it was wine, he added that it was completely different from what they got at taverns. Our protagonist then suggested that instead of having inexperienced people like this, it would be better to bring the mansion's cooks here. When she returned from her adventures, she could handle the parts that needed magic as they came up. But then she figured the cooks probably wouldn't quit their prestigious jobs at a noble household that easily. Sword then told her that before she left the mansion, he had already made arrangements with the cooks. He offered to fund them so they would continue brewing and sell it commercially. As a result, with the cooks leading, almost all the servants agreed. But it was only if Lady Indra gave her permission. Seeing how it was, he decided to pop over to the mansion to tell them. Meanwhile, Sangas mentioned that he would prefer their base to be in the suburbs instead of inside ES because there was more foot traffic there. Indra was still shocked at how fast Sword made his move. Later on, while she was working in her lab, there was a loud beep from the speaker. Hearing it, she knew the people coming had finally made it. Thanks to the location tracking magical device that she developed, Sword never expected they could make a round trip from the mansion to Ease in a month, but they arrived safely. Those staying behind at the mansion would no longer be handling alcohol production. The cooks, servants, and maids agreed to come along, each with a condition. Everything was okay. But Sword was shocked by the absurd size of the mansion in front of him. Our protagonist laughed and told him to quickly get in. Entering the house, our protagonist showed Sword the toilet, which was a flush type. There was a bath with a tub, and the kitchen even had a garbage disposer. She used all the knowledge she had to renovate it to be close to the level of the house she used to live in. Here, she could live without breaking down in tears. And her magic tool making was practically professional level now. Indra had also discovered that one could use magic stones to replenish the mana needed to power magic tools. They mostly came from monsters' bodies, but small amounts could be harvested from natural sources too. Large ones were used for development, while even tiny scrap stones had their uses. Thanks to magic tools powered by scrap stones, even the sewage system was perfect. Immediately afterward, the cooks and servants kneeled before Indra and greeted her. She told them she was no longer a noble, but just a commoner now, and that it was Sword who negotiated with them. Even so, they came here, hoping to be of service to her. However, she pointed out that it was Sword who called them here and paid her. She and Sword were partners, but they were here to help him and not her. Sword asked her not to brush them off like that because they were happy to see her again. But Indra doubted that was true. She felt like to them, she was just someone oppressed by the household and someone they didn't want to be with. She believed that they probably only thought of using her knowledge of cooking and brewing. The servants were speechless, as our protagonist said that was all they ever saw in him. Sword then walked up to her, telling her that even though she went around telling others that they didn't consider people's feelings, she was actually the same way. She was shocked by his words. But Sword explained that these servants looked on angrily at how she was being mistreated, waiting to help but unable to do anything. She had never realized how much they regretted that. She would probably say that if feelings didn't lead to actions, then it was the same as not having them. But Sword argued that it wasn't true. He said it was just her being unable to put herself in someone else's shoes, which was no different from her not understanding how they felt. He asked our protagonist if she realized why the servants came to her and bowed their heads. He told her to try to understand the reason behind it. Looking at the people before her, Indra's mind flashed back to the past when they were strands of her hair on the floor. Her maid walked in, shocked at the sight, and said she would take care of it later. But Indra told her not to worry because she would handle it herself. Afterward, the maid brought the new clothes she requested. Indra had no problems trying them on. Then, the maid told her the dress came with a hood that covered her hair. Our protagonist thought this would protect her from a bit of rain and wind. However, the maid was sad about Indra's hair, telling her it would grow back soon anyway. Just like her mother, Indra's hair was so glossy and beautiful. In other words, she took it that this was a shameful sight, unfit to be shown as a noblewoman. However, she had already cast that away. Later on, the cook showed our protagonist their newest creation. Some of them commented on how slender she was, remarking that she needed to eat a lot. But another chef felt like they just wanted her to taste test every recipe. On the other hand, Indra felt she was being used as a poison taster. Even when she was leaving the mansion, they wished her to live long and stay well. The butler also told her not to worry about the estate and to leave it to the elders. He wanted her to go out and experience more of the world and live in good health. On her way out, the maid rushed to our protagonist, making it just in time. She asked Indra to take a comb with her. It was something she had once received from our protagonist's mother, so she wanted Indra to have it. Indra had always thought no one could understand her situation, and that thought consumed her completely. The maid then wished her a well stay with tears in her eyes. After recalling all these memories, our protagonist started crying and felt like she was a horrible person. Sword tried to calm her down, telling her it wasn't true, even though he knew that was a fat lie. He claimed that even though she talked roughly, she was still kind-hearted. After all, she even forgave him, and she also looked after her half-sister as well. He told her that she only acted tough because her environment was rotten. At heart, she was the kind of person who trusted others too easily. He wiped her nose and told her to look at herself now. Sword then addressed the servants, telling them that even though our protagonist seemed grown up, she was still a little girl. When emotions ran high, especially if she saw something dirty, she would cry. So he told them to make sure to keep the place clean. Indra then asked them if cleaning was all right. Over at Count Springcord's mansion, the servants were going about their activities, tending to the gardens, cleaning, and making food. In the Count's office, he felt it was about time to take a break, but Hannibal refused. The butler stated that the lord inherited the Springcord domain from his predecessor, squandered it through idleness, and as a result, the domain's management collapsed. In the past 2 years, recovery efforts hadn't even reached 20%. The Count complained that he hadn't gone into town for 3 months. So, He reasoned that taking a little break once in a while wouldn't be bad, but Hannibal still refused. And the butler also caught Primrose hiding, even though she tried pretending not to be there. Even if the young lady wasn't around, the head maid was still there to catch her. Primrose screamed in fear as she was told that her tutor had arrived. She complained about the person because they always scolded her, so she didn't want to see them. But she didn't have a choice. Primrose wished her elder sister were here to take this instead. Hearing this, the head maid looked out the window, smiling to herself. Meanwhile, our protagonist asked Sword if he knew what she'd been thinking. She told him how she was thinking of going back to her real profession, as an adventurer. She ended up throwing herself into the mansion, brewing liquor, and getting carried away making magical tools. If their cooking team opened a restaurant, it would become a huge hit in no time. And if they put those magical tools on the market, they'd be raking in profits easily. Sword reasoned that it meant she wouldn't need to be an adventurer anymore. But she got dressed, complaining that he'd been doing adventurer stuff, gathering materials and all that, but she hadn't done anything at all. She also wanted to go adventuring together with him. Hearing that, he was quickly ready to go adventuring with her. This guy really has no sense of pride. Sword then informed the servants that they'd be away from the house for a while. The maid and cook hugged Indra, telling her to press an emergency button if she sensed any danger approaching. It would activate a defense system. They'd also cook lots of meals and keep everything sparkling clean as they awaited her return. Then, they all warned Sword to take care of our protagonist and keep her safe. Immediately afterward, they set out. Indra asked Sword if he had a destination in mind, and he told her they'd head toward the royal capital for now while sightseeing along the way. However, she had something she needed to do, which was raising her adventurer rank. She remarked that the guildmaster had raised her rank before. The guildmaster had told her that, with her immense strength, there was no problem. But if she was teaming up with Sword, staying at G rank would be ridiculous. So, he bumped her up to the highest rank he could authorize as guildmaster, which was D rank. Sangha and Sword knew fully well how strong she was, but not everyone could recognize it at a glance. The quickest way was through adventurer rank. Teaming up with Sword meant she'd be handling S-rank quests, which were mostly unresolved cases that no lower-ranked adventurer could deal with. He then told her that going to the mountain where she was staying was exactly one of those cases. Basically, Indra needed to raise her level. With this in mind, she remarked that humans in this world were really foolish. She told Sword that monsters were far wiser than humans who attacked recklessly. They actually understood the difference in strength and acted accordingly. She felt like killing humans who acted like monsters might be kinder to the rest of the living world. However, Sword argued that even if monsters didn't attack her, they were still attacking other people. He wondered if she was a demon lord. Indra got excited hearing about demon lords, and she thought there'd be heroes too. Sword told her that the heroes had a crazy superiority complex, so it was better to stay away from them. She assumed heroes and S-rank adventurers were the same. But Sword explained that heroes were chosen by the kingdom as representatives for the invasion of the demon lord's domain. An S-rank adventurer, on the other hand, was someone the guild recognized for their proven strength and accomplishments. Indra remarked that heroes basically went to foreign lands and tried to destroy them, while S-rank adventurers were those who had slain monsters powerful enough to wipe out entire nations. Sword praised her for understanding it, and he told her she'd be taking the promotion exam in the next town. For that, they'd be going into a dungeon. Indra was shocked as they got to the entrance. He then told her that the promotion exam was passed by clearing a dungeon, so this place made the perfect practice. For her, it would be a breeze. But it was still her first dungeon. Our protagonist noticed that it wasn't just a cave where monsters happened to settle in. She didn't know all the details, but one theory said they formed from a reservoir of magical essence bubbling up. But the truth wasn't really clear. Inside, there were many monsters, and at the very deepest part lay the dungeon core. However, the biggest taboo was destroying the core. Sword told her she'd understand the reason once they went inside. For adventurers, dungeons were places to make money. So, if one was destroyed, it was a serious crime. Not like she'd survive if the core broke because the dungeon would collapse anyway. Sword also explained that dungeons were managed by the guild in the first place. For low-threat dungeons like this one, she could come and go freely. But in high-threat dungeons, entry was strictly controlled. One would have to get an entry permit in advance and go in and out at the declared time. If they didn't return at the scheduled time, a rescue request would be issued. Our protagonist remarked that at that point, it almost sounded like an amusement park attraction. Regardless, it was her very first dungeon, so she wanted to enjoy it to the fullest. Suddenly, a robot showed up in front of them, and they looked frightened, having no idea what it was.
In the face of the fearsome robot, Sword suddenly cried out, asking Indra why the hell she made it look like a giant spider. She smirked, gloating at the fact that this was her creation, known as the Battle Golem, with learning capabilities. Its name was Ryoke, and it wasn't as scary as it appeared to be. The reason it looked like a spider was that spiders were beneficial creatures. However, Sword argued that spiders either wrapped things up in webs or melted them into goo before eating them. Indra wondered if spiders in this world were really like that. Sword also mentioned that her naming sense didn't make any sense. She explained to him that in another world's language, Ryoke actually meant noble steed. So it was less like a spider and more like those humanoid golems that protected a city. It's not like she had spent the past 2 years just maintaining the mansion. Our protagonist claimed that once one had mastered the almighty art of magic, there were things one simply had to do, and that was to create a fully autonomous AI robot. Of course, Sword was too clueless to have any idea what she was talking about. She explained that the main core of the robot was installed in the deepest layer, protected by her barrier and security magic. No one was allowed to touch it. This Ryoke and the one back at the mansion could share data with each other through wireless access. Even if they ever fell out of sync, there was a backup core. Sword recalled the time Indra threw a tantrum and begged for a huge magic stone. He figured the stone became the brain of the robots. She reminded him that when he called out to Ryoke, it actually replied to him. And he got so happy, he kept talking to it over and over. Being too embarrassed, he told her to shut up and get going. Sword let her know that tackling a dungeon solo was tough. Since Ryoke was her golem, she could bring him to the exam and he would count as a weapon slot. But that was if he was actually recognized as a golem. Depending on the dungeon, sometimes maps were sold nearby. Even if it was pricey, he advised that it was better to buy one. He already had a map of this place, but since the real test didn't allow maps, they would go without one, this time on purpose. Sword also pointed out that it was pitch black inside the cave. Indra was annoyed by this, asking if the dungeon core didn't turn on the lights out of kindness. Sword then mentioned that the dungeon wasn't some noble's mansion, inviting her in with a warm welcome. If everything she said was summed up, it sounded like a tourist attraction meant to draw crowds. Sword told her that in a situation like this, the basic thing to do was to light a torch. Indra then put a device on her head that shone light into the cave. She called it a headlight. Sword was freaked out at how she was casually using light magic like it was nothing. She explained that the device was to be worn on the head so both hands could stay free. Plus, it lit up wherever one looked. She questioned whether people in this world were suicidal for using torches in caves. Fire burned by consuming one of the essential components humans needed to breathe from the air. So, it made sense that if one burned a torch in a poorly ventilated cave, they'd pass out in no time. Once again, Sword was the dumb guy who knew nothing about this. Our protagonist told him that before calling her a know-it-all, he should try asking why something was the way it was. This world ran on mana. With mana, one could do almost anything, but there were still other essential elements that mattered. Of course, not everything worked the same as the world she came from, but she had personally confirmed the principles of fire here. Still, if there was some airflow, a torch might have a nice old-fashioned charm to it. Sword told her not to use it just for aesthetics. She remarked that light wasn't technically a spell. Actually, she had programmed a few other spells she could use into Ryoke. The robot's eyes suddenly glowed bright as it scanned everywhere. Within seconds, it was done mapping the first floor and quickly displayed the map. Sword was so amazed he had no idea what to say. Meanwhile, Indra praised her robot for doing a good job. Ryoke started blushing, but our protagonist explained that this was just a basic routine and that the robot hadn't actually learned it. With the map, she was able to point out all the areas that had traps in them. Eventually, Ryoke got tired and Sword started to think it was actually an idiot. Immediately afterward, they were able to proceed safely, bypassing all the traps in the cave. Indra remarked that clearing a dungeon with a map was boring. There was zero of that exciting, we're on an adventure feeling. Sword warned her not to ever say that in front of a real adventurer. They had come pretty far in. The next moment she looked up and they were standing in front of the boss's room. Opening the door, she could tell it didn't form naturally. She wondered why nobody in this world cared about stuff like this. Then she noticed a giant ogre sitting where the dungeon's core was. Upon noticing her, the monster slowly stood up. Our protagonist apologized for showing up out of nowhere and using violence, but at least she would kill him instantly, so she asked that the monster forgive her. The monster let out a frightening roar and charged toward her. With its giant axe, it shattered the ground. However, our protagonist easily evaded the attack and sliced off the boss's head before it could even react. Immediately after, Sword asked her why she talked to monsters like she was trying to be cool. She explained that it was terrible to be one-sidedly killed by someone who barged into one's home. So, it was the least she could do out of courtesy. She was confused as she saw the monster's body dissipating. Apparently, monsters born from the dungeon didn't leave remains. After a while, they would revive. As long as the dungeon core existed, it was effectively permanent. After the corpse was gone, a chest materialized in front of them. Staring at it, Indra doubted that this was actually coming from the dungeon core. Sword told her not to sweat the details and just open it up. Opening the box, they saw a potion inside, and he told her that she got the good one. Seeing that chest could be a hit or miss, she felt this was just turning into more of an attraction. It was basically a price to entertain the customers. Even though they didn't lose anything, this little brat wasn't fine with the way things turned out. Sword then told her that she got a low-grade healing potion. Other things that could pop out were antidotes or mana recovery potions. Even low-grade healing potions were rare to begin with. Commoners normally used medicinal herbs after all. As they proceeded to leave, our protagonist thanked the dungeon. Sword was confused as to what the hell she was doing. Back at the Adventurers Guild, Indra completed her registration for the C-rank exam. Then, Sword met up with her, and she asked if he was doing some kind of paperwork as well. He confirmed it, leaving her a bit confused. Immediately after, they walked into a house, and she freaked out, seeing that Sword had rented it. She had told him it was fine to sleep out in the forest, but he told her not to get so gloomy about it. With her magic, even camping out could feel like staying at a high-class inn. So, she didn't get why he bothered paying rent to get such a filthy place. Our protagonist didn't have money, so she was already making him pick up the cost. And he wouldn't let her pay because he always told her he had money and it was fine. A little kid like her was being done a favor, but she still complained. Sword then told her to come in, letting her know that this kind of thing was part of the thrill of adventuring. Immediately after, Sword was slamming an empty glass on the ground as he lay drunk on the ground. Indra was irritated, seeing that he rented this place just for this. She tried warning him that alcohol could lead to addiction, but he claimed having it once in a while wouldn't hurt. Besides, she used to snore away without a care, even in the forest. However, our protagonist hadn't been able to relax at all. Adventurers coordinated with each other while camping out. He told her that whenever he camped with other adventurers, it was nothing but trouble, so he tried to avoid it if he could. Still, adventurers were known to encounter all sorts of situations. Jobs came up where it wasn't just the both of them, and they'd have to handle it with a crowd. In that case, they couldn't say no. She figured if it was a job they couldn't refuse, it was probably urgent and important anyway. If they refused it, it basically meant quitting being an adventurer. It wasn't like she was completely incapable of cooperating either. Even so, Indra couldn't completely trust the people of this world. Sword understood her, and he advised that she should take care of her first and use others if she had to for that. He promised to stay by her side, and he meant it. But accidents always went beyond what one could predict. So, until he could get to her in times like that, she had to take care of herself. She stared at him in admiration. Slowly, she realized that all along, from the very beginning, what she really wanted was to rely on someone. And to have someone stay by her side, together. Staring at Sword, who was completely wasted from the alcohol, she decided to leave Ryoke on guard so he could take a rest. As for her, she was going sightseeing. He advised her to take the robot with her, believing no one would be dumb enough to pick a fight with someone walking around with a golem. She argued that there were definitely people like that. Idiots who couldn't even recognize her strength, let alone Ryoke's. They were crawling around everywhere. Sword suddenly wanted to come with her, but she stomped on his face, telling him to just rest. Besides, if she walked next to him right now, the combo of alcohol breath and old man smell made her want to puke up her breakfast. Hearing that, he kicked the little runt out. To think she was even worrying about him. Outside, some little kids were amazed seeing her robot. She told them it was a golem known as Ryoke, and when it spoke, they were even more surprised. Indra then decided to ask them for a favor. Ryoke was still in the middle of learning, and there was a lot he didn't know yet. So she asked the kids to teach him a few things. She started out by asking the name of a shop she pointed out. The kids told her it was a weapon shop, a place that sold weapons, and Ryoke repeated after them. They went ahead teaching him the names of different shops. She remarked that it was hard for Ryoke to learn much when it was just her teaching. So she would have him talk with the kids to build up his vocabulary. And she'd like him to pick up a more childlike way of speaking while he was at it. Suddenly, a girl behind her, Kathy, told her friend she was going to buy some herbs because the exams were coming up soon. Indra and the girl turned to face each other, and as they locked eyes, the girl was furious seeing her. Kathy yelled at our protagonist, asking her what she was planning to do with the kids. Then, she asked the kids to stay away from the robot. Indra wondered if this little brat was actually talking to her. She wondered who the girl was and if she knew anyone like that. She then asked Ryoke to greet the girl, which the robot happily did. Indra found it a bit sad that the greeting was so formulaic, and she wished he had more variations. But on a second thought, she decided to put her hopes in his learning function. Kathy refused to believe it was possible for such a golem to exist. She warned the kids again to get away from it. Indra thought these adventurers were all the same. They didn't even know the difference between the strong and a golem. Kathy sparked again, asking what she just said. Seems this girl is just a hot-tempered idiot. Our protagonist then told the kids not to stay away from Ryoke's side. She immediately ordered her robot to deploy the mana barrier, and it complied quickly. Meanwhile, Kathy was still telling them to get away before they get hurt. Our protagonist explained that she was just walking through town and the kids were simply teaching words to her golem. Then, Kathy showed up and started yelling at them for no reason and was even about to attack while Indra was defenseless. Being a kind soul, Indra decided to let her off because of her cute face, threatening her adventurer's license could get revoked if she tried anything. Kathy's anger only grew more. Our protagonist continued teasing to go easy on her, but Kathy refused to fall for that cheap line, stating that she wouldn't forgive Indra for the last time and now. However, Indra wondered if this wasn't the first time they were meeting. Kathy refused to be underestimated, even if Indra had an S-rank adventurer as a mentor. Immediately, she started chanting a spell. While she was still chanting, Indra asked if it was Sword she was referring to as the S-rank adventurer mentor. She only saw him as a partner and definitely not a mentor. Plus, she didn't recall ever meeting Kathy before, considering she just came into town yesterday. Kathy was frustrated at how long her spell was taking, which mostly showed how useless she was. Finally, she cast the blazing flames, unleashing a huge fireball directed at Ryokei's barrier. The kids screamed in terror, but suddenly the flames vanished. They were all stunned and speechless. It seemed our protagonist didn't even need to have Ryokei activate the barrier. The kids praised her for being so cool. They asked what she did just now. So, Indra decided to explain why fire burned. There were components in the air that helped fire burn along with the base essence of magic. So if those elements were removed, the fire would vanish instantly. She was getting a little too overconfident with all the praise. Bystanders then came by, surprised by the robot and wondering what was going on. Our protagonist was getting teary-eyed, wondering what to do. She thought about having Ryokei call over Sword to help her. Immediately after, Kathy's friend yelled out her name. Kathy fell to her knees as her friend scolded her for causing a commotion just when the exam was about to start. Indra reminded Kathy that she was going to let her off if she stopped, but the girl just had to start chanting a spell. Kathy's friend looked at her with threatening eyes, asking if she was trying to pick a fight. A man then approached from behind Indra, asking what was going on here. Seeing that he was a guild official, she tried to explain that she didn't do anything. Before she could barely get the words out, Kathy started screaming that it was Indra's fault. She swore she wouldn't calm down until Indra ate her words and was taken down. Then the official asked which of them had used magic. All hands pointed at Kathy, and the girl realized how foolish she was. All those tears in her eyes were worthless. The guild official then asked if Indra's robot was a monster, but she tried to tell him that it was a golem. Though it clearly didn't look like it, he was shocked, hearing that she made the golem herself. She made it in her own way. So unlike other mages' golems, it didn't move with a single command. It needed to learn, so she had been walking it around the city and teaching it different things. Along the way, the kids talked to her and offered to help. That's when Kathy showed up, blasting magic at our protagonist to make her eat her words. The man was still thinking about the situation, but she told him that everything was already explained. Immediately after, Sword dashed toward Indra, yelling out her name. Before she could tell him anything, his fist landed on her face, sending her into the sky like a shooting star. As she crashed to the ground, he yelled, asking what the hell she was doing again. Sword yelled at Indra to stop egging people on and making the situation worse. She explained that it was out of her control and she wasn't egging anyone on. He was the one whose scolding kept getting harsher. As the guild official approached him, he showed his adventurer card. Everyone was shocked to see that he was the one known as Lord Thunderclap Whitefang. Even Indra was confused. Sword then told the man that she was his partner, and even if the girls had said something rude, he begged the man to forgive them this time on his account. The official told him that he only came because there was a report of offensive magic being used in the city. Meanwhile, everyone else was shocked to hear that our protagonist was actually Sword's partner. After that, Indra tried to make it clear that she wasn't the one at fault here. Sword assumed she used that taunt skill of hers to make the girls snap, but she told him that she was just teaching Ryoke things and playing with the kids. He was shocked to hear that she could actually get along with the kids. I honestly wonder what this guy sees this girl as. Then, she claimed to be the hero of boys and girls everywhere. An old man came up to them, letting Sword and the official know that Indra wasn't using magic. He saw just having fun with the golem, and none of the children seemed upset or crying either. With that settled, Sword and Indra were free to go. As for Kathy and her friend, the official called them over. Indra then asked Sword if he knew that girl, but he had never seen her before. However, she seemed to know Indra. He figured it was one of those "I know you, but you don't know me" types. Flashing his rank card was something he hated having to use to intimidate people. Indra apologized about that and told him that at least it worked on her. If it were our protagonist, she wouldn't have cared and would have just walked off. All because she saw him as just a smelly old man, which he didn't appreciate. She asked if he was still holding a grudge. This girl really knows how to push someone's buttons. She told him that if he washed properly, he wouldn't smell. Plus, he needed to stop drinking so much alcohol. But rather than do that, Sword preferred to stay as a smelly old man. The exam day finally arrived. Indra asked Sword if exams in this world were supposed to have parental supervision, given that he was there as her guardian. He told her it was necessary, since someone loved to cause chaos. She told him he was like one of those overexcited parents at a school visit and asked him not to interfere with the exam. But she was the one who was always causing trouble, and he was here to keep an eye on her. Immediately after, an official arrived and was shocked to see them here already. Indra told them that they walked and ran a bit to get here. Still, this place was pretty far away from town. Her attention turned to Sword, who was yawning tirelessly. She asked if he was okay, especially since he'd been drinking every day lately. He assured her that he was fine, since he had taken an antidote. But she yelled at him not to drink to the point of needing medicine. He assumed that she could make antidotes herself, but it wasn't that. Medicine in this world came from dungeon materials. Once one drank it, they'd be instantly healed and detoxed. Indra's parents were apothecaries in another world, so she learned a fair bit. Medicine was supposed to enhance the body's natural healing ability. Sword didn't care about any of that. He asked her to make some for him next time, brushing her off completely. Immediately after, she turned around, seeing the girl she had issues with yesterday. She remarked that it was good she didn't get her license revoked, and the girl claimed she was just trying to help. Indra was forced to gain an adult-level education when she was a child, which made her ask if commoners interpreted, "I'll make you eat your words, as I'll come to the rescue." The girl was immediately angered. Sword then confirmed that this wasn't normal. The girl started yelling like a deranged idiot, saying they'd never lose to someone like her, and they would beat Indra and laugh right in her face. Our protagonist provoked them further by stating that they were at that age when they were all fiery and desperate to prove themselves. The girl then mentioned the Crimson Lily is a maiden's oath, asking if that party name rang a bell. Indra was shocked to her boots, seeing that parties could have names. Slowly, she called Sword and asked if they were a party, which he confirmed. Suddenly, she started crying, asking if they had some cringy name like that. He assured that he didn't give them that type of name. But at this point, he couldn't understand what made her cry every time. Indra claimed the name was so lame it scared her. However, everyone's taste was different, though she said it just didn't suit her. After that, one of the girls explained that a few years ago they were active in the town of Iaz. They had just been promoted to E rank when the guild approached them, informing them that there was a kid being looked after by an S rank adventurer. The girl had talents but was still new, so they wanted the party to teach her a few things and let them know that she could use a sword and magic, making her useful as a vanguard. With just the three of them, it was going to get tough sooner or later. They had just been talking about adding another frontliner, so they agreed. After getting the signal from the guild, they went to talk to the girl, only to get ignored, and it turned out that the girl was Indra. After our protagonist recalled, she punched Sword, asking if he was listening. She then apologized to the three girls. At the time, she only knew her house well, her estate, and the forest. Then, some adventurer dragged her out and suddenly abandoned her. She'd lost trust in people because of that. It wasn't just them. She had ignored and shut out everyone, but that didn't excuse her rudeness. So, she apologized once more. Sword also admitted his wrongdoings to Indra. He apologized and explained that he wasn't letting her team up with anyone else again. The girl said it was fine. It wasn't like they'd know what to do if she asked to join them now. Still, it didn't sit right with them when Indra got promoted to D rank afterward. Kathy started yelling about how hard it was for them to reach E rank. Having an E rank look after a G rank was already a huge privilege. And they went out of their way to talk to Indra, only to be ignored. Our protagonist already apologized for ignoring them. Besides, most of the reason was because of Sword. So, they were free to take it up with him. And the one who promoted her was the Ease Guild Master. Kathy accused our protagonist of always acting all high and mighty, hiding behind powerful people. Indra told her not to get so worked up because it would ruin that cute face of hers. Kathy was freaked out, wondering if that was supposed to be teasing or just an old man comment. Indra was just trying to calm her down, and if they were going by that logic, it would make her the old lady. Immediately after, a guy walked up to them, remarking that it must be nice being a rule-breaking exam taker. He added that it looked like the ones guaranteed to pass, thanks to their S-rank connections, were sure relaxed. Our protagonist then understood that was how they saw her. She turned to Sword, who was staring at the guys with a menacing aura. Indra didn't get how he ended up being her partner in the first place, but to people of that level, she understood how it looked to them. But Sword knew she would probably clear the dungeon on her own strength without needing any S-rank connection. She reminded him that he told her not to cause trouble. Our protagonist was planning to finish quietly without even looking at the map, but he took those words back and told her to clear it as fast as she could. So, Indra happily switched to a non-stop speedrun mode. The guild officials arrived and all the participants lined up. The lady would now explain the C-rank promotion exam for adventurers. The exam would take place in a dungeon located a short distance from there. First, they had to reach the dungeon on their own. From there, they would proceed to the boss room and defeat the dungeon boss. Then, they needed to bring back the tag found beyond that room, which would make them pass the exam. However, taking too long would result in disqualification. Indra wondered if beyond the boss room was where the dungeon core was. Either way, she needed to be careful not to accidentally destroy it all. Meanwhile, Kathy was trying to cheer up her party member, telling her not to doubt herself now. Immediately after, all 5 participant teams were given the go-ahead to commence the exam. Without a moment's delay, our protagonist dashed forward with her golem, leaving the others shocked. One of the guys laughed at her, calling her crazy for running around blindly at that speed. He wondered if that connections-based applicant had never been in a dungeon before. On the other hand, Indra wondered if the others could really make it in time going that slow. Judging by the mana density, she sensed where the dungeon was. In no time, she found a guild official by the entrance. As she dashed past him, he was shocked to see an applicant already. Obviously, the plot armor on her was extraordinary. She quickly moved in and evaded the horned rabbits that showed up in front of her. Ryoke then shot out a laser that turned the monsters to dust instantly. Going through the door ahead, Indra brought up the map and was able to locate the boss room. As she swung the doors open, she saw a large horned rabbit, which happened to be the boss. The monster's eyes locked on her with fury, but our protagonist was unfazed. She dived toward it, slicing off its head effortlessly. Once the monster was down, she proceeded to the door ahead of her. Opening it, the man inside was scared to his bones. She explained that she was an applicant and kindly asked for a tag. He was confused, asking when the exam started. She told him that it started quite a while ago and that she was going for a non-stop speedrun clear. But now, she had to stop. Meanwhile, other participants were barely halfway through. After the man gave her the tag, she told him to give her regards to the dungeon core. He realized that she was the S-rank adventurer's apprentice. But he was mistaken. She wasn't an apprentice, but his partner. No way in hell would she agree to be Sword's apprentice. He acknowledged that she was the fastest, first one here. Meanwhile, the other adventurers were having a hard time dealing with the monsters in the dungeon. Some were injured, and the healer was tending to their wounds. Suddenly, the monster stopped moving, and they turned around. The adventurers couldn't understand why. Then, one of them yelled out that something was coming. It turned out to be Indra, riding on Ryoke, and she quickly zoomed past them. The rest were stunned. Then, our protagonist wished them luck, letting them know they were on the right path. This left them completely speechless. Immediately after, she arrived back where the exam started. Sword remarked that she was a little slower than he expected. She explained that she had to stop midway to talk to the examiner who gave her the tag. But he was only kidding. If she had time to chat and still made it this fast, she basically sprinted the whole way. After all, that was the rule. To her, it felt like a real adventure, and it was pretty fun. One of the examiners then walked up to her, asking if she had her tag. She submitted it and asked if there was anything else. He then told her to wait for the results. Once all participants were finished, they would return to the guild and announce the results in an hour. Since all participants had entered the dungeon, he suggested they wait by the entrance. Indra hoped it wouldn't take so long. However, Sword told her not to measure by their standards. Normally, clearing the dungeon took 2 or 3 days. So, they would have to set up camp and wait. When they got to the dungeon entrance, one of the examiners realized he wasn't seeing things and commended Indra, referring to her as Thunderclap White Fang's apprentice. Suddenly, she threw her hat to the ground. With her body trembling, she mentioned that she'd been hearing that phrase a lot lately and often missed it when people said it. So, she asked the examiner to repeat what he just said. Once he mentioned Sword's title again, our protagonist looked like she had heard the worst thing in her life. She screamed out at Sword, asking him what that unbelievably embarrassing name was. Why would he ever call himself something so humiliating? Indra was so annoyed by the name because it made no sense to her, and it was so cringe. It was making her tear up. Hearing her say this made him want to cry. She told him to drop the ridiculous title because he'd never be able to show his face in town again. He tried to explain that he didn't name himself that, but she then asked what the hell she was supposed to do. After that, she asked if he was the type to mutter, "My right hand throbs," At this point, she was treating it like a disease. Sword was even more freaked out that she admitted it. Our protagonist claimed that people with that kind of naming style supposedly said things like, "Ugh, the evil eye sealed in my right eye aches." It was apparently some kind of condition where they muttered stuff like that. Sword questioned who the hell even sealed things inside their own body. If it were him, he'd seal a demon somewhere no human or monster could get close to. She explained that sealing was like a cool, aspirational word in other worlds. This only made Sword certain that other worlds seriously made no sense. Then he made it clear to the examiners that Indra was his partner and not an apprentice. Immediately after, she decided to focus on getting dinner ready. While they chopped up meat and pitched tents, Sword went hunting. Slowly, the other adventurers started coming out, and they were given food as well. Most of them were completely exhausted. Some still had the energy to yap, while others wanted to sleep. Eventually, our protagonist asked if this wasn't taking too long. It had already been 5 days. She got so bored in that time that she upgraded Real K's map to display in 3D. She asked Sword if the others could really still be in the cave all this time. Looking at the examiners, he noticed that there had been some movement. The examiners then thanked the others for their patience. As for the 2 teams that still hadn't returned, it seemed they hadn't been able to locate them, and it appeared that the 2 teams had ventured deep into the cave. It was kind of a backward request to issue a request to the examinees themselves, but the guild officially requested the rescue of the 2 lost teams. This was a formal rescue request. Thanks for watching, and thanks to all of the supporters that made this video possible. If you would like to help the channel, please use the QR code in the screen. And last but not least, a super thanks to our high-ranking supporters: Arizona Gold, 1090, Fallen Stella, Joel Alvarado, Julian Hernandez, Kildrak, Hitsuka, Lucifer High-Rise, Not Omega's Foot Fungus, Pawe Jajeski, and NATO Enthusiast. Thanks, and have a nice day.